Hey, what's up everyone? Welcome back to Infinite Omega, with me, Black Deatha. As I'm sure you can already tell, this video is a little bit different than the usual. And the reason is, well, this video today we're going to be talking about Star Wars. And when it comes to Star Wars, I actually have quite a bit to say. Both in terms of what Star Wars meant to me as a kid growing up, as well as my thoughts on where Star Wars seems to be going in its future. For my part, like many others, I first saw Star Wars when I was young. My first time seeing Star Wars was viewed exactly as it should have been. We watched the entire trilogy in a marathon of episode 4, 5, and 6, back to back to back. And at that point, I absolutely fell in love with those movies. This was years before the special editions even came out, back on that old black VHS box set many of you may remember. And from that day, I've been a die-hard fan ever since. And I began to collect everything I could get my hands on. I think the first thing I ever bought was the Kenner Power of the Force Luke Skywalker action figure. And over the years, that collection would grow exponentially, with me getting first dozens, then hundreds of the figures, as well as vehicles and ships. Not to mention all the books and comics and games, and basically everything in between. For many years there, if it said Star Wars on it, I probably wanted it or already had it. Now, I'd watched those VHS tapes over and over and over again, and one thing that was actually pretty cool was each movie had a segment of an interview conducted by Leonard Maltin with George Lucas talking about Star Wars and its potential future. And the one part I always took particular note of was towards the end on the Return of the Jedi segment when they would talk about the prequel trilogy.
Your many fans, and there are many avid fans, as you know, of the Star Wars trilogy, are wondering about the next three films. And why is it taking so long? Why does it take so long? And how long will it take?
Well, I'm working on the next three films, and I am in the process of writing the three screenplays now, and it takes a while to write the screenplays. To write the first Star Wars took me about 2 years, so I'm writing three scripts at once. It won't take that long, but it takes a long time to prep them, and hopefully we'll have one finished for 98. If not, it'll be 99.
This is the part of the interview that I'd always focus on the most. Just the thought that we would be getting a prequel trilogy coming to get to see the rise and fall of Anakin Skywalker as he became Darth Vader. It was just such an exciting idea. And plus, it meant we would be getting not just one, but 3 new Star Wars movies, so what wasn't to like about that? And this was really a great time to be a fan, as we were starting to see a real resurgence in popularity of Star Wars, and things like Shadows of the Empire had come out with the games and books and comics and toys. And following that, of course, we'd have the 20th anniversary of Star Wars, and we would see the special editions come to theaters. This was a big deal for me, because this was the first time I would ever get to see the original trilogy on the big screen, and I absolutely loved it. Now, obviously the special editions did go on to generate a lot of controversy amongst the fandoms, but that's a rather old issue, and it's not really the one this video is going to discuss. Suffice to say, I think most of us can agree on a few key points. There were some great improvements and enhancements, there were some not so great changes, and last but not least, Han shot first.
I bet you have.
And then, on May 18th of 1999, I found myself standing in line for about 8 hours. A trend I would repeat with episode 2 and 3 as well, with even longer wait times. But this time, the wait was for the midnight opening of Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. Sitting in line, my excitement was palpable, and I could not wait to see what was next in the galaxy far, far away. Now, I'm sure the more cynical of you out there are probably thinking I'm going to now say how much I hated it. But no, that couldn't be further from the truth. When I first saw it especially, I loved that movie. And yeah, well, now many years have passed, and I sit here as an adult, I can acknowledge that the movie has its problems and its flaws. And it's definitely not a perfect Star Wars movie by any stretch. But I don't hate it. In fact, I still have a lot of love for it. And honestly, there's a lot to love about it. Yes, it's true, Jar Jar is extremely irritating, but this movie also gave us pod racing and Darth Maul, and let's not forget Duel the freaking Fates. In this case, both the epic lightsaber duel as well as one of the best pieces John Williams has ever done. And then in 2002, we would see the release of Episode 2, Attack of the Clones. Now, just like with Episode 1 before it, I was ecstatic to see this on opening night. When I first saw it, I absolutely loved it, and I still do appreciate it to this day, although I can also acknowledge it's probably the weakest of the movies in the prequel trilogy. And while this movie does have several problems, its most glaring has to be the poorly written dialogue for the romance subplot between Anakin and Padme.
I don't like sand. It's coarse and
rough and irritating, and it gets everywhere. Not like here. Here everything is soft and smooth. I'm haunted by the kiss that you should never have given me. My heart is beating, hoping that that kiss will not become a scar.
I've been dying a little bit each day since you came back into my life.
Now, this isn't even meant as an attack on George Lucas. The man has a lot of strengths, such as world building and overall storytelling. But writing romance, not so much. It's certainly a missed opportunity that George Lucas didn't simply have someone who had a strength in writing romance help him with the love story on this movie. To a partial degree, you can at least rationalize some of it, though, I suppose, in the story, by saying Anakin was raised by the Jedi and really didn't have a lot of interaction with the opposite sex. But even that explanation only gets you so far. And again, despite its flaws, there's a lot I like about Episode 2. Such as the character's Jango Fett, and getting to see how a Mandalorian fight in combat against a Jedi. Although later that doesn't really work out so well. But it does bring us to the next point about how both Mace Windu and his purple-bladed lightsaber are awesome. And of course we can't forget getting to see Yoda fight for the first time. In 2005, we would finally see the release of Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. By far the strongest and my personal favorite of all three of the prequels. By this point, it's clear that George Lucas had become more comfortable back in the director's chair. And while it still has its missteps,
You're so beautiful.
It's only because I'm so in love.
No, no, it's because I'm so in love with you.
Come on, George. But there was a lot he did right. I think by this point, Jar Jar literally has only like one line in the movie.
Excuse me.
Pipe down, Jar Jar. And for everyone who loves lightsaber duels, which I think is most people, this is the movie for you. It's just filled with duels from start to finish, culminating in the most important duel we had all been waiting to see since the prequels first began, that of Obi-Wan and Anakin, well, now Darth Vader. And of course this duel was paired with the epic duel between Yoda and Palpatine. At this point, with Episode 3, and with it the prequel trilogy having come to a conclusion, the future of what would be next as far as Star Wars movies went was uncertain. Of course, we did have the Clone Wars, which continued Star Wars, at least on the small screen, but the question lingered, would we ever get another Star Wars movie? After several years, it was starting to look less and less likely. While George Lucas had said in the past that he may someday do a sequel trilogy, it seemed at this point that after all the backlash he faced doing the prequels, he just didn't have it in himself to do it anymore. And while I, and probably many others, wanted to see another Star Wars movie, I was starting to accept it probably wasn't going to happen. This all changed on October 30th, 2012, when it was announced that Disney was purchasing Lucasfilm for $4 billion. Additionally, it was stated that they were going to be doing a sequel Star Wars trilogy, episodes 7, 8, and 9. For many, this news came as a cause for celebration. But for me, my reaction was one more of mixed feelings. I wouldn't exactly say I was excited by the news. In fact, I was actually really more worried about what this meant for the future of Star Wars. Some of my immediate concerns were what this was going to mean for the expanded universe going forward, as well, was Star Wars going to be the same under Disney? Along with the news of the buyout, we also learned that Kathleen Kennedy had been appointed the head of Lucasfilm, as well as all things Star Wars. Now, back then, I had no idea who Kathleen Kennedy was, so her being appointed the head of Lucasfilm didn't really mean anything to me one way or another. And given that we were told that she was handpicked by George Lucas to run Lucasfilm under Disney, we could at least hope that she was someone who's going to care for and respect Star Wars. And, well, it would be a while before we would find out how that would turn out, but more on that later. Some of the news that came out in the weeks and months following the merger was not encouraging. First, we would learn that indeed the expanded universe was being scrapped. Additionally, LucasArts was shut down by Lucasfilm. Arguably, this didn't seem to set them off to a great start. Now, I can certainly understand the practical as well as business reasons behind stepping away from the expanded universe, but that didn't make the news any easier to swallow. And shutting down LucasArts just seemed totally unnecessary, especially given that Disney would then turn around and make the dumbest choice possible and give the license to EA. Eventually, we would learn that the title for Star Wars Episode 7 would be The Force Awakens, and Lucasfilm would go on to detail their I guess you could call it a plan, that we would get a new episode of the sequel trilogy every second year, and every alternating year we would get a Star Wars spin-off, with the first spin-off being Rogue One, a Star Wars story. Despite my concerns and misgivings, I wanted to remain hopeful, and I would remind myself that under Disney, Marvel was doing incredibly well, and there was no reason that Lucasfilm and Star Wars couldn't fare the same. And the various information that we were hearing about Episode 7 prior to its release did sound promising. And as December 18th, 2015 rolled around, I was excited as I could be to see what Disney and Lucasfilm had in store for me with The Force Awakens. It tells the story where one member of our trio of heroes stores information vital to the plot in the memory of a droid, and then themselves goes on to be captured by the evil Empire. This droid manages to escape, and on a desert planet eventually meets up with the main hero of the movie. This hero eventually meets up with an older mentor as well as the third member of the trio, and all of them decide to go help the droid complete its mission. All the while, they are pursued by an evil empire led by a dark, cloaked figure. They learn that this evil empire has a weapon capable of destroying whole planets. Eventually, the older mentor figure goes off to face the dark figure who they have a familial connection to, and our hero character witnesses as the dark figure strikes them down. Eventually, the underdog fighters, led by one of our heroes, manages to strike a crippling blow against the weapon of the Empire, destroying it once and for all. After seeing it the first time, I did have mostly positive impressions, although I did have some misgivings about a few things. For one, I couldn't figure out how both Han and Leia had gone on to spawn off this. And on that note, on my way home, one thing that really bugged me was, did they just kill off Han Solo? That part did not sit well with me. And the other immediate problem I had was, had they actually spent the entire movie building up the question of where's Luke Skywalker only to show him at the end for about 1 minute of screen time with no dialogue? As time went on, I realized there was a lot of other issues I had with the movie. Fundamentally, one of my biggest problems with the movie is the backstory, what little it gives, that basically implies that everything went to hell after Return of the Jedi. The defeat of the Empire seems to have been for nothing, as the First Order magically appeared to take its place. It's implied that Luke was a complete failure in his quest to bring back the Jedi. And I mean, come on, they couldn't even leave Han and Leia to have a happy ending together. But overall, while I do feel The Force Awakens is a deeply flawed movie, it's not bad. It just could have been a lot better. And as far as being Disney's first attempt, it was okay, and it seemed to be setting up something interesting going forward. Now, with The Force Awakens behind them, Disney and Lucasfilm had won over a lot of the fans, who were looking forward to seeing what was next. This would come in the form of Rogue One, a Star Wars story, on December the 16th, 2016. Rogue One is a prequel set directly before the events of A New Hope, telling the story of a band of rebels who managed to steal the Death Star plans and put them in the hands of Princess Leia. While the movie didn't tell us a drastically new story that we didn't already know, it was still well done and had a likable cast of characters. They even managed to resurrect Grand Moff Tarkin to a bit of an uncanny effect. And as a bonus, we even got a scene that was apparently not even planned from the beginning. But when they thought of it, they knew they had to do it. Of course, I'm referring to the awesome Darth Vader hallway scene. I think for many fans, after The Force Awakens and now with Rogue One, we were starting to feel a sense of
Hope.
I would be worried if everybody across the board was like, yeah, that was a good movie. It's much more exciting to me when you get, a group of people who are like coming up to you and really, really excited about it. And then there are other people who walk out literally saying that was the worst movie I've ever seen. Having those two extremes to me is the mark of the type of movie that I want to make.
For over 1,000 generations, the Jedi Knights were the guardians of peace and justice in the Old Republic. Before the Dark Times. Before the Last Jedi.
how will Luke Skywalker die?
A young idiot director named Rian Johnson, with more ego than talent, inexplicably be given writing and directing duties of Episode 8. He will help Kathleen Kennedy betray, character assassinate, and eventually murder you.
No. It's not true. That's impossible!
What I told you was true, from a certain point of view.
So as you may have guessed, this brings us to December 15th of 2017, where we... Oh, damn it, this is the wrong screen. One sec. Nope, that's the wrong one too. Just a sec, I'll get it. Okay, there we go. As I said, December the 15th, 2017, with the release of Star Wars: The Last Jedi. Now, I know there's many out there who love or at least really like this movie, and if you do, you know what, that's great. But you cannot deny that this is the movie that absolutely fractured the fandom. It's probably not too hard to guess on what side of that divide I stand. And to be honest, the first time I saw it, I wasn't actually sure what I thought. I wanted to like it, I thought I liked it, and I couldn't really reconcile the very notion of not liking or even loving a Star Wars movie. But here I was having very conflicted feelings about The Last Jedi. And on my way home from this movie the first time, my thoughts mirrored that of The Force Awakens, except this time I was thinking, did they just kill off Luke Skywalker like that? And for me, the way Luke Skywalker was disrespected in this movie is nothing short of a travesty. While I didn't love the foundation that The Force Awakens laid for Luke Skywalker, I was at least excited to see what was going to be next, now that we were going to get a movie where he was actually going to be a central character. And, with the last movie ending, with Luke standing on that mountainside, wearing his Jedi robes, with his old lightsaber being held out to him, we could wonder, what was next? Well, with The Last Jedi we would finally get our answer. Who can forget that beautiful scene where Luke takes his lightsaber, ponders it in his hand for a moment, and then chucks it over his shoulder like it's a piece of garbage, then goes back to his hut, and for no reason whatsoever changes out of the Jedi robes he was wearing at the end of the last movie. Fantastic writing, Ryan. Nobody wanted a payoff to that plot thread anyway. And this is just one of the many problems present throughout the entire runtime of this movie. Rian Johnson was more interested in doing whatever the hell he wanted to appease his own ego, rather than try and make a good Star Wars movie that logically progressed the story. And Kathleen Kennedy, who's supposed to be the steward of all things Star Wars and look at the bigger picture, let him do it. He would talk about in interviews how he was allowed to do whatever he wanted with The Last Jedi, as there was no plan going into it. And while it seems to be true that Lucasfilm did have the genius plan to have no actual plan for the entire trilogy, it's also true that while they were making The Force Awakens, they did plot out a general idea of where the next movies would go based on what The Force Awakens had started. And apparently these outlines were then given to both Rian Johnson and the then director of Episode 9, Colin Trevorrow. And rather unsurprisingly, Trevorrow would eventually leave the project, with he and Disney citing creative differences, with many believing that Trevorrow felt making the next movie was now futile because Rian Johnson had sabotaged it with The Last Jedi by killing off both Snoke and Luke Skywalker. I mean, who'd want to have the hero and the main villain be present in the third act? Actually, maybe he should have stuck around, realizing the genius of Rian's plan, who was simply trying to help him subvert expectations in the next movie as well by having no plot whatsoever. Quite honestly, it blows my mind how Disney let this happen. On the one hand, you have Marvel and Kevin Feige, who have planned out the entirety of the Marvel Cinematic Universe over 20 movies now, with a very strong direction of where they're going. And on the other hand, we have Lucasfilm, and the brain trust that is Kathleen Kennedy and her crew, who only had to plan out a single trilogy, just 3 movies, and they completely dropped the ball. For instance, what was the thought process behind killing off Snoke, who was being set up as being the big bad of this trilogy, in the second movie? And I mean, yes, it subverted our expectations. It surprised me when I first saw it. I thought, oh damn, I didn't expect that. And that's really all Rian Johnson seemed to want. He didn't seem to care about the ramifications this would have on the trilogy at large. And this brings us back to his brain-dead decision to kill off Luke Skywalker. Even if he truly felt at the time that this was the best next step for Luke's character, which it wasn't, he should have recalculated this plan following the tragic death of Carrie Fisher on December the 27th, 2016. And while her passing was very sad, it did happen almost a full year before the release of The Last Jedi in theaters. This would have given Rian Johnson more than enough time to go back and make some necessary changes, given that Carrie Fisher would not be able to film the next movie. And given that this very movie has a scene in which Leia is thought to have died, this would have been the place to make some changes. And then, rather than killing off Luke, they could have reworked the ending so it would be he who was alive going on into the next movie. This is in no way meant to disrespect Carrie Fisher's work in the movie, but only an idiot director who's driven more by his own ego would rather see his original vision through even when the actress has passed away than to make a sensible choice about not still setting up her character to have a prominent role in the next movie when she won't even be able to be there. Ideally, I would have preferred to see both Luke and Leia survive into the next movie. Finally, as The Last Jedi comes to a close, we get one final pearl of wisdom from Rian's genius. Anyone, even a nobody, could potentially be a Jedi. Except that that's nothing new and has been true in Star Wars the entire time. Now, I could go on and on about this movie, as there's so much more to say. I haven't even begun to scratch the surface. Suffice to say, though, this movie was an unmitigated disaster. And, to make matters worse, in the months and years following the film's release, Lucasfilm and Rian Johnson decided to go on an attack against the fans who didn't like the movie. I, for one, hope that Rian Johnson never gets to make another movie in the Star Wars universe again, and his trilogy should be cancelled. But, moving on. On May the 10th, 2018, barely 6 months after the release of Last Jedi, we would see the release of Solo, a Star Wars story, a movie that nobody asked for. To be honest, the movie was better than I expected it to be, but that's not saying a whole lot, as I had incredibly low expectations given all the production troubles we heard about behind the scenes. I do have one major issue with this movie, though.
What's your name, son?
Han.
What? Who are your people?
I don't have people. I'm alone.
Solo?
No, I mean, come on, you couldn't let Han Solo just already have his name? He had to be given it by some random Imperial clerk? That's literally the dumbest thing in this movie. But at least it's still better than The Last Jedi. Oh yeah, and that scene at the end with Darth Maul where he randomly turns on his lightsaber for no reason? I have a theory that the only reason they had him do that was so that they could maintain that every single Star Wars movie has had a lightsaber in it. At this point, I think it's fair to say that the Star Wars fandom is more divided and alienated than it ever has been before. There has been some good news as well, as The Mandalorian has turned out to be quite enjoyable, and, you know, everybody loves Baby Yoda. Also, we had the long overdue announcement that there's going to be an Obi-Wan TV show starring Ewan McGregor. Now, I was originally hoping for a movie, but I will definitely be happy with a TV show. Of course, the big news today is the release of Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker, the movie that Disney says will be the end to the Skywalker saga. I have wanted so much to believe that this movie will be amazing, that it will be able to fix everything that The Last Jedi broke. But I must admit, I was not encouraged when it was announced that the title of this movie was going to be The Rise of Skywalker, as all this did was scream desperation on Disney's part. And then when we found out that Palpatine, a character who died at the end of Return of the Jedi, will somehow be returning back to life in this movie, it really does make this movie seem like it's a disaster waiting to happen. I hope I'm wrong. I want this so badly to be the movie that fixes everything that The Last Jedi broke. Unfortunately, after so many leaks from behind the scenes of a troubled production, and then there's the reactions that we're hearing from the premiere the other night that seem to confirm that a lot of the story leaks that were coming out are all true. Also, apparently George Lucas was not in attendance at the premiere. Whether it was due to him not being invited or not wanting to go, it's hard to say. Either way, I'm going to be seeing it myself tonight, and while I want to love it, I can't say I have my hopes up. And as a Star Wars fan, that just makes me really sad. I hope I'm wrong. Make sure you check back here on Infinite Omega again soon, as I will be doing a video of my reactions to The Rise of Skywalker. For now, I hope you've enjoyed this video. It did take a long time to put together, but I really felt I wanted to do something, just as the Star Wars fan that I was, and my sadness at seeing where the fandom is now. If you enjoyed this video, please go ahead and leave a like down below, as well as comment on the video. Share it out with your friends, and if you haven't already, do subscribe to the channel, as I'll be bringing you a lot more great content in the future, and your support really does help out a lot. Also, if you've enjoyed the music that you've been hearing here today, you should definitely check out the channel of Samuel Kim Music, as he was the one who was kind enough to allow me to use some of it in this video. Anyway, this is Infinite Omega. I've been Black Deatha, and this has just been a video I wanted to do about the state of Star Wars as it is right now. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. You guys have yourselves an amazing day. Goodbye.